Alright, we got the MJX 10208 V2. So this has been slightly redesigned for this particular version. The V1, I do have a video out there already, and it looks like they changed a few things. They didn't really tell me exactly what has changed, but stuff I noticed is there's definitely more front droop there on the front wheels, so that was kind of an issue before. Just didn't extend far enough. They did redesign the battery straps a little bit, so they look a little bit longer and skinnier, but they look pretty beefy, or a lot of stitching stuff, so they feel a little thicker. Did upgrade the turnbuckles, it looks like, so they are also a little bit thicker. And then tires, yeah, maybe a little bit stiffer, I'm not sure, hard to tell exactly. I noticed the Loctite is a little bit better on some of these screws, so they were a little over Loctite before. And then they also did I guess stiffen this little sliding switch here, so it does seem to lock in a little bit better. So hopefully all these changes kind of improve the truck, and we'll see how it actually drives. So this is running on 3S. It does also support 4S. I think retail price for this on Amazon is going to be about $400, but there should be a coupon code, so I think it'll actually be a little bit less than that. Okay. Lost power there. Alright, batteries I came unplugged. Okay. So the one thing I mentioned to MJX about the V1 that I thought needed some improvement was the rear arms were too soft. So the rear arms are like super flexible, and they actually twist like longitudinally, I guess you'd call it, where essentially it's mounted to the chassis, and then the part that goes out to the wheel is actually twisted because the shock is pushing down so hard, and the shocks are so flexible that you end up with what I would guess you would call like dynamic anti-squat. So as the shock compresses, as the arm basically gets pushed down by the shock and the suspension compresses, the anti-squat starts changing mid-stroke. So that's, I guess, kind of the technical explanation, but what ends up happening is the rear end's kind of inconsistent. It's got inconsistent anti-squat, so it tends to just kind of move a little bit erratically, sort of independently from the rest of the truck, and you end up with the rear end kind of like basically not having very consistent control or application of anti-squat to the rear end, and that's what makes it kind of dance around on the rear end a bit. And it's not too bad, but you'll notice the rear end is just very inconsistent on this truck. So they made it super flexible to give you more durability, which I understand, that's what most people want. But in terms of how it actually drives, yeah, it's a little bit weird on the rear end. So my suggestion was to increase the stiffness of the rear arms, not so flexible. But as far as I could tell, they didn't really do anything. It seems about the same to me. So yeah, just something to be aware of is that, yeah, the rear end is a little inconsistent. But I did also increase the punch to 8 out of originally a 7. So it sets the max punch, and I think that's the only other change I made to this truck. Other than that, it's completely stock. So that's 3S, full power, full trigger. But yeah, fun little truck. It's quite durable. Handling is a little weird still, but looks like the shocks are a little bit better. couldn't rotate it. That was full trigger, not enough power. So I think on 4S would be pretty darn fun. But this is how it comes on 3S. 4S would be a separate battery. But yeah, I like it. The tire's actually not too bad. You know? Handling's alright. Does bounce a bit still. Could still use a little bit of tuning, but it is improved from the last time I drove the V1. So yeah, nice little improvements they made. Decent power, not crazy fast. And definitely can take a bit of a pounding there. I think value is pretty solid. I mean, 400 bucks, a bit pricey, but for something that is 4S capable, not a whole lot's going to be much cheaper than that. So here's a quick look at what I mean by the dynamic anti-squat or the inconsistent rear end. If you look at the chassis, the arm's pretty much straight. It's probably about 0 degrees of anti-squat, so the arms are basically flat. But then if you look at the wheel, and if you can see that arm inside, the arm's actually pointing downward. It's supposed to be pointing upwards. Anti-squat is supposed to resist the rear end compressing. But as you can see here, you basically have like pro squat. It's actually tilted the wrong way, and that's because the arm's actually twisted. So the shock is pushing down on the arm here. It actually pushes more on the front of the arm, and then the rear of the arm's still kind of twisted back because it's held up by the hinge pin there. But yeah, you end up with basically the arm being twisted, the hinge pin on the wheel side basically pointing the wrong way, and then you end up with just rear anti-squat. And then as you compress it, it actually gets worse because shock is twisting on that arm. And then yeah, that's what leads to the super weird rear end on this thing. Just it's very inconsistent and a little bit erratic in how it actually drives. Well, body can still fly off. Okay, there's some running footage, and I just kind of want to wrap up this video taking a look at the truck here on the bench. So this is what it looks like in, you know, up close a little bit. Visually, it looks actually very similar to the V1. To be honest with you, MJX RC did not provide me with a list of the changes, and so I just kind of went off what I could see visually. There are definitely some things you see, like the turnbuckles, the longer shocks, that are changed from the V1. But thanks to actually Volt Up RC, he provided a list of the actual changes. So there is actually a V1 to V2 upgrade kit that is floating out there. I would say, yeah, it's actually pretty difficult to convert this from a V1 to a V2 in my opinion. The V1, I also mentioned, had way too much Loctite on a lot of the metal to metal parts. So in my opinion, it's actually pretty difficult to disassemble this truck. I had a lot of issues with like the center brace and stuff taking apart my V1. So I would say, yeah, you maybe could go that direction if you got a V1, but you know, be prepared to you know, remove strip screws, heat up different parts, and it'd still be maybe quite difficult. But yeah, in terms of the pricing, also MJX RC told me is $400 here in Amazon. They will have a coupon code on the day of the release. That should be about a week from now, so I'll throw that link in the description below when it is available. Obviously, I think you'll be able to buy this for cheaper outside of that. You know, for sure, a lot of these Chinese brands you can buy on different websites and stuff and get a little bit better price, but you'll have to wait longer, that kind of thing. And so pricing does vary quite a bit, but the official Amazon price is $400.
In terms of the actual changes, so yeah, they did make quite a few changes. I'll provide a picture here from Hayden Young, who actually has the upgrade kit showing all the things that they actually modified. But going through it real quick, they did actually modify the chassis, so there are some different changes. I think both for robustness as well as like some of these screws that they're using for the skid plate here in the back. So front skid plate are slightly redesigned. Chassis is a little bit different. They did change the gearbox cover here. They did actually change the shocks, like I mentioned. The shock towers, I believe, are also a little bit different. The arms are supposed to be 20 millimeters wider. That's what, Volt Up RC says. To me, if you told me it was like 5 to 10 millimeters wider, I would believe you. But yeah, supposedly they're wider. I actually don't have my V1 anymore to compare, but it is supposed to be a little bit wider. The turnbuckles, like I mentioned, are different. The arms are supposed to be a little bit longer. The drive shafts are longer. What else is there? I think that's pretty much it, in addition to like the battery shafts and stuff that I mentioned, a little fan cover here. So yeah, there are a lot of subtle changes that you might not see visually at first glance, but it is a little bit different. So it is truly a V2. In terms of how it actually drives, so I did talk a lot about the Pro Squat, or whatever you want to call it, the flexible rear arms especially. The front arms I think are not that big of a deal. They work for the most part okay, but the rear arms is really where I noticed it. It is better than the V1. It does feel more solid. It does feel a little bit more consistent or predictable, I guess is the best way I would mention it. The V1 was pretty much kind of all over the place. They did do some changes to the chassis, to the arms, all that kind of stuff, which I think make it more stable, a little bit easier to drive. Definitely the application power works pretty well. I think these tires are actually pretty good. The V1, I was actually running Proline trenchers just to get a little bit wider offset from the body so they wouldn't rub as much. But I didn't really have issues with the tires rubbing. You could, I think, at full turn actually rub the tires up against the body, but I didn't really experience that in the air. So the truck, driving-wise, is substantially better. The V1, honestly, I probably would have given like a 1-star rating. Actually, how it actually drives, I think this is average. This is definitely a couple levels up. It's not perfect. There are still some things, like I mentioned, with the arms and stuff that I would prefer that they changed. I also think that they do need to retune the shock pistons a little bit. There's just way too much, I guess, surface area for the pistons to glide through the oil. So I don't think they changed that. And I believe the stock oils are actually incredibly thick, like 1K, 2K fluid, something like that, maybe even 3K, I can't remember. It's really, really thick fluid because the holes in those pistons are way too big, and then they actually allow too much fluid in. Just to get enough pack, they need to actually run ridiculously thick shock oil. So hopefully they can retune that, maybe provide some new updated pistons, some stiffer rear arms, and I think they really have something pretty good. In terms of actually the electronics, I don't know if they retuned the radio or the ESC or anything like that. The radio and the ESC are actually pretty smooth. It's reasonably linear. I've had this radio quite a few times in the past with other MJX RC products. I was not a big fan of that radio, but this whole thing works better than I remember with the V1. So I think throttle application feels actually reasonably smooth. It is fairly easy to control the power. On 3S, it's not crazy fast or anything like that. I think part of that is probably the center diff needs a little bit thicker oil, or maybe it's a little bit dry or something like that. But they also do sell a 4S LiPo battery if you want more power. And I think this truck can handle it. Like, the beefiness of this thing is pretty absurd. All the drive shafts, turnbuckles, all the metal stuff is crazy durable. I think the chassis is very durable. I haven't heard anybody about breaking the V1, so I didn't have any issues with that. The arms are super flexible. The bumpers are super flexible. I think the little latch here on the body is an improvement. It actually works quite a bit better. So overall, the truck is very durable in my opinion. I had no issues, concerns, anything like that with durability. It's just some of the driving characteristics I think could be improved. And it does have LEDs and stuff, so pretty nice. And like I mentioned in the V1, the ESC is basically programmable through an app, which is nice. You can adjust, brake strength, punch level, I think even the BEC voltage and stuff. So very, very nice little improvement, or actually feature that they basically no other RC at this level is going to have. So yeah, overall the truck very, very durable. I think value wise, if it's more in like that $300 price range, I think it's actually pretty good. In my value category, it is a lot different than most people. I talk about the actual parts that you get, what's actually supplied in the kit. This is much more heavily upgraded in terms of durability, in terms of components than most 10 scale RC cars, which tend to have plastic drive shafts, plastic turnbuckles, that kind of thing. So that I think is actually pretty good. Just hopefully they come out with some stiffer arms. I think that'll make the truck drive a little bit better. These tires actually hook pretty good, so I'm impressed with that. So anyways, there's a quick look at the Hyper-Go. The other parts that it comes with is a wheelie bar, some additional tie rod ends, some basic tools, some faux bumpers. It actually included a couple sets of arms and knuckles, so I was really impressed with that. Like a full set of arms, hinge pins, nuts, C-blocks, all that, spindles, all that kind of stuff. Well, not spindles, but C-blocks, and then a charger for your battery. Overall, yeah, I think value-wise, if it's less than $400, I think you have something actually pretty competitive. So there's a quick look at the Hyper-Go 10208 V2. If you have any questions, throw them down below, and hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.